Well, happy Wednesday, everybody, and thank you for your patience. Getting started a few minutes late. I don't like to be late, so I am probably more annoyed with myself than anything, but I just wanted to see if I could get my hands on a couple of documents before we went live tonight. So I'm expecting a couple more, or at least one more person to come onto the panel at some point. And so, Cherie, I don't recall if you're listening, get your butt in here. And in the meantime, I just wanted to say hello to Katie Did It and Alice, and thank you for joining the panel tonight.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. And let me go ahead and
Hello.
run down the whoops, run down the see who we have in chat so far. Um, Robsky will be listening, but he's busy, so he's going to listen and he'll try to jump into chat when he can. Hello, Meg. Hello to JD. So happy that you could be with us, JD. And Heather B. Welcome. And look who it is, Millbilly. Hey, Millbilly, what's up? Thanks for joining tonight. So there's a few things that it's been kind of a although it's only Wednesday, there's I feel like it's already like October or November the way this week has been. Um so we yeah, I had to restart too, Cherie. Yeah, that's cool. Just jump in when you can. But yeah, just we've some of it. Well, Kay and I have been extremely busy working on a project for Daniel, and I don't know, Kay. Maybe you feel differently, but I feel like as the hours that we put in this week, I feel like we haven't accomplished anything. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's a lot of reading, a lot of searching to try to find something that clicks, that fits. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it can feel like a waste of time.
yeah. What's interesting about it is that it's just like with any other case. You go down rabbit holes. You're looking for something specific, and then all of a sudden you see something or read something you've never seen or read before, and then you're off onto another whole thing. So it's really kind of it's frustrating, educational, but when you're on a time crunch like we kind of are, it's it's a little rough. So um, we've had Jello for brains this week. Like I said, it's only Wednesday. Hey, Dark Side, thanks for dropping in. Loving having you here. So yeah, we've been doing that, and so I haven't. I mean, what I've known what we were going to do and what we were going to talk about tonight, but it just hasn't had a lot. I haven't had a lot of time to put the work into it. But that, don't fear, you're still going to get all the information, and um, we'll leave you some at the end for you to do some listening on your own to get details, but you're going to get the really good gist of what we're going to talk, the accuser that we're going to talk about tonight, who is CARLA JOHNSON. However, we do have a couple of things that we want to talk about first, because uh, they're definitely related to Daniel in some way. And the first thing is that we finally got a response from Oklahoma about disgraced former judge Timothy Henderson. And if you don't mind, Kay, I'm going to kind of let you tell, if you don't mind, if you would, please let you tell what was decided and how it may or may not affect Daniel.
So, just for context, what happened was it April of last year
Yeah,
when he
it came out at the end of March, and he resigned. What, the 4th or something of April, something like that.
so he steps down. This is Daniel's trial judge. He was forced to step down because at least two ADAs from Oklahoma County uh, prosecutor's office, district attorney's office, were having inappropriate sexual relationship with him, which they alleged was assault. These were ongoing relationships. So there are actually 5 women. One is a sheriff deputy. I think the most recent article finally disclosed. So there are 2 that we have no idea who these women are. And I always am suspicious that one of them is the ADA that helped prosecute Daniel's case, Lori McConnell. And it's really frustrating not to have those names disclosed. Anyway, so not long after he stepped down, the governor of Oklahoma asked the OSBI to conduct an investigation because DA David Prater was conflicted. So they started doing that, and that's been, a 14, 15-month ongoing investigation at this point with no resolution yet. So I'm not sure when the grand jury investigation was called for, and I didn't know how all that works, because it seems weird to have the OSBI doing an investigation and then have the grand jury doing one as well. But my suspicious mind also just instantly thought this is all David Prater, the DA, trying to affect an outcome that he wants, which I still believe that to be true. But I've since found out that the assistant attorney general is the person who oversees or runs the grand jury. But that doesn't mean that Prater doesn't have his hand in it. And so we got an answer from him that there's not enough evidence to charge him with any criminal charges. I should have pulled up the article. Do you have that handy to read that last part? There was a quote in there.
That's a load of bullshit. No enough evidence to charge him. Bullshit. You know what I mean? That's them covering their own arses again.
I know. Yeah, the special prosecutor is apparently a close friend of David Prater's. So there was never any doubt that special prosecutor was handpicked, at least not in my mind. But he said something like, do you have that article, Rhonda? He said something to the effect of,
yes, I have it. Sorry.
Do you see that quote in there where he talks about it being clear that that he was manipulating these young women to have things happen in his favor?
I'm going to share the screen and share the article right now, and we'll kind of scroll through it real quick and see what we can, you can tell me where to stop. Okay, so there's his ugly face. No charges against former Oklahoma County judge accused of sexually assaulting multiple women. Did you say that was near the end?
I'm not sure. It was a different article.
Oh, it's right here. Okay, so this is let's see. Oh, well, this is Special Prosecutor Jason Hicks says, quote, "In this investigation, it is crystal clear that Henderson preyed on young women whom he believed would respond in his favor. His actions generally started with emails, text messages, and an acknowledgement that he was willing and could help them with their careers," end quote. That was in one of in his statement about his decision. And he says, "It's obvious that he violated the trust of the public and our profession, and as such should never be allowed to practice law again. And I guess I just thought that went without saying. But
he's practicing law, so.
Yeah, Kate tells me he's actually practicing law in Oklahoma, which makes me sick.
Jesus Christ. So to me, what that tells me is if you're a lawyer, if you're a judge, then you can sexually assault any woman in your offices or anything like that. But don't worry, because the lads have got your back and you'll get away with it and you can still practice law. What a load of fucking bullshit.
Well, as long as you're, in the network.
Right.
There's definitely a network. He was never, I can imagine that Henderson was never worried for 1 second that he was going to be found guilty. He's been playing these dirty games for a long time. He's been well protected. And once again, he's well protected. So,
yeah.
I just feel like something like this grand jury investigation just punches a hole in the balloon of the OSBI investigation. But, there are still those same connections with people running the OSBI investigation.
Right.
On LinkedIn, Henderson starts buddying up to the head of the OSBI and another guy just in the comments, just making pleasant comments on his LinkedIn page. It's like, oh, interesting that you're buddying up to the OSBI right now.
Yeah. It's disgusting. It's frustrating. However, it has been decided already that at least one of his cases is getting a new trial. Aaron Fort, which was a drug trafficking case. And so he has been granted a new trial because it's been proven that he didn't get a fair trial because he I can't think of the Kelly Collins. Yeah, Kelly Collins, ADA Kelly Collins, and former Judge Henderson were actually having an extramarital affair during that trial. And it's just wrong. I mean, it's just so mind-boggling that to even think or consider that there wasn't any kind of bias that was being given to the ADA, from the judge. So, and how this applies to Daniel is, we don't know that it does necessarily, but it could come into play for Daniel if there was an extramarital affair or a sexual assault or anything like that going on while during the secret hearings that were held, the ex parte hearings that were held, that Daniel nor his defense counsel were allowed to, or even notified of, much less allowed to attend.
Well, just the fact that he was having all these escapades with all these women during that time, he had no business ruling on cases, especially cases of a sexual assault nature. And I believe anyone who was in his courtroom during that period of time when it's proven that he was doing that should be allowed a new trial if they request it.
Especially if he was sleeping with a fucking assistant district attorney. You know what I mean? That is just wow, because they could have been doing favors for each other. You know what I mean?
Well, even if he wasn't sleeping with Kelly or with Lori McConnell, the people in the DA's office are close, and Lori and Collins prosecuted cases together. They obviously, well, not obviously, but I can't imagine that they're not friends.
Right. Well, yeah, of course. I, I
I say that because Henderson could do her favors just because she's Kelly's friend.
yes.
So it's just all shady as shit.
Or there was rumor that we did dig into and try to get information on, but it's very, very uh, tightly sealed. But there is a possibility that Henderson, and speculation warning. I'm going to have to, but there is a possibility that he did have some sort of a inappropriate relationship with Lori McConnell, because at some point, I believe, and Kay will correct me if I'm wrong, there possibility. Well, Lori McConnell ended up divorced shortly after Daniel's trial, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. So did Lori.
Yeah. What did I say? I meant Lori McConnell.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I didn't know Kelly Collins was.
Oh,
married.
I didn't. Oh, I'm so.
There were a couple ADAs that ended up divorced.
Yeah.
Right then, that doesn't mean it was for that, but it is interesting to know.
Yeah.
Now
So
that was the courthouse gossip that is the courthouse gossip among the attorneys that work up there every day. So
right.
we may never know. It could be a reason why they, when everything gets handled in the grand jury, you don't get to see a lot of things.
Right. And a lot of things we might have seen otherwise, but for the grand jury, we won't now because of it being a part of the jury.
We might when the OSBI is finished, but
So,
someone on a Facebook thread said that you could get the emails, you could get access to the documents.
Through ORR, open records request?
I guess that's not the way he made it sound. He made it sound like it was public information on OSBI's website or the district attorney's office website.
Okay, cool.
But I went there and I didn't see anything like that except an open records request link. So
Yeah. Well, I say let's do it then. The worst they can do is tell us, sorry, you can't get it.
yeah,
So I think
it'd be
that,
entertaining.
yeah, entertaining and possibly informational and helpful. We'll see. Really quick before I move on, Robsky has given our like button a flavor of Willy Wonka's Fudge Mellow Delight flavor. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I've even liked my own video yet, but if I have not, I'm doing it now. Sounds yummy. Thanks, Robsky. That sounds like a great flavor. So everybody make sure you get a taste of that Willy Wonka's Fudge Mellow Delight. Scrumptious. So, all right. So that is, that's at least movement on what's his face, the disgraced former judge. It's not completely done. Once we hear something, hopefully from OSBI, maybe we'll have better news. And I'd love to see him not be. I'd love to see him disbarred. I'm just disgusted that he gets to practice law still. So. But I don't know all the laws and the rules and the whatever. I just, as a morally speaking, I just think that it's wrong. So that's just my opinion about it. But yeah, we also have some other information that is extremely exciting. Well, I shouldn't get so excited about it, but it's a pretty big deal. We've had several notices from, when I say we, I mean those of us who are researching and trying to help with evidence or whatever we can find for Daniel. But we have some new new motions and orders and things that were delivered this week. I don't even know where to start. So just to refresh, if you don't know, there is a civil suit, that a federal civil rights violation civil case going on, or in the works, in the process. And initially there out of the 13 accusers, 11 of them, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's exactly. We just read about all that too the other day, which was disgusting. Kaczynski is still practicing, last I knew. So, and he's a judge, if I'm not mistaken. Kaczynski, Brendan's joke defense attorney. So yeah, yeah. So I mean, obviously, crappy, sick stuff gets to happen. But so
actually, it was 11 of the 12 that filed initially.
11 of the 13, or
I'm sorry, DERP. 11 of the 13.
13.
I'm sorry. Oh my God, double DERP. 12.
I'm glad you're backing me up, because I thought I meant to say 11, and if I didn't, I apologize. But 11 of the 13, really quickly after the guilty verdict, filed the civil suit, or joined it.
12 of them.
12 of them. Yes, 12 of them initially. One of them, though, that got it down to the 11, never responded to the interrogatories, and that was Sarita Bowen.
Yeah, and the judge booted her.
Yeah, kicked her out because she just wasn't responding to the interrogatories. Her case was flimsy at best, anyway, in my opinion. I want to give some of these people that I'm going to talk about tonight, I want to give them some credit, in that I think with Sarita Bowen, because her case was so flimsy, as I said, I like to think that she just said, you know what, I shouldn't have, taken this to trial to begin with. I was not assaulted by him, and I am not taking part in this civil suit. I like to think that's why she didn't.
We have no idea what kind of coercion those women could have been put through, and if that really is what happened. In all of this time since trial, with all the coverage of it, and videos and everything, all the documentaries and podcasts and stuff, I bet they've learned a lot about their own case. And some of them might be feeling a little bit duped, because, when you look at these accusers individually, it's really easy to see how the detectives told them things like, I know you're telling me the truth. I know which officer did this to you. And if they were really raped, like I believe Terry Morris really was probably assaulted where she originally said it happened, and to have someone flip that around, and with her, she's mentally ill, but even with Sherry Ellis, she says it's a short black man. Kim Davis actually said what I just quoted, I know which officer did this to you, Sherry. If I didn't believe you, I wouldn't have, called you. So I just really think that some of these women believed that the detectives had solved a case of a legitimate rape, and they, helped them they helped them recall the traffic stops. And if Daniel gave them a ride, I think if you get a ride from a police officer, you're going to remember that. Things like that. Anyway, sorry I cut you off and went on that long rant.
No, I'd like when you fill in, because clearly I've already made a couple of mistakes tonight, so I'm glad you're here to back me up or correct me for sure.
Well, that's big.
The last thing I want to do is give out false information, or incorrect information. I would never willingly or intentionally give false information, but I do make mistakes.
It's easy to misspeak too when you're talking about this case, because it's just so much to learn.
Well, yeah, there's so much to it. Um, so yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I agree 100% with you, and I know not everybody sees it this way, but I fully believe that a good handful of these accusers were victimized by the system at the time that this began. Uh, yes, they had a lifestyle before, they made choices, and in that sense, people want to, it's easy for people to say nope, they don't get any passes from me or whatever, because they did this and this and this, and they put themselves in this. And I get that, I understand that uh, thought process as well. At the same time, yes, they're in that situation, but to take advantage of them while they're in those situations, especially if they are under the influence of drugs regularly, which many of them were. And in the case of Terry Morris, you guys need to go back and rewatch the videos if you haven't seen them. The little, I think it was a 3-part series we did way back in the beginning, kind of, about Terry Morris and how brutal Detective Rocky Gregory was with her. He was cruel. He badgered her. He bullied her. And he made it all sound like I just want to make sure that, we're taking care of you, and that that you get justice, and we got to get this bad cop off the streets. And, he's saying all the right things, but the way he badgered her and played on her mental illnesses and her drug use, it was just brutal.
And then ultimately, after Liggins makes her allegations, then goes back after she signed a decline to prosecute, goes back and drags her back into the case, because it's the only way that they could see that they were going to even be able to file charges against Daniel, because nothing had checked out with Janie Liggins' story, as far as fingerprints and handprints on the car where she said they would be. That wasn't there. And I'm not sure at what date they got back the DNA and found out that, or I'm sorry, not the DNA, got back the results of her sane exam to find out that none of Daniel's DNA was in her mouth.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, I haven't said that none of these women were assaulted, right? Yes, I do think a couple of these women were assaulted by a police officer, but not Daniel.
Right.
No,
You know what I mean? Daniel's 6 foot odds, built like a brick shithouse, and is half Japanese and half American. You know what I mean? And these women were describing a short black man. Now, I blame these women to an extent.
Sure.
But the
yes.
majority, because these women were in the only situation that they thought that they could be in at that time of their life. Maybe it wasn't the greatest situation with drugs and prostitution and everything like that, but to them, that was the only way that they survived. You don't diss anybody for that, for having to live that sort of life, because that's the only way that they know how to get through. Addiction is a bastard, no matter whether it's drugs or alcohol or whatever. It is a bastard.
Yeah.
So I don't blame the women for that. What I do blame the women for is the ones that have came forward. In fact, not even the ones that have came forward. The ones that have stood there and blatantly lied about Daniel supposedly assaulting them at this point or this point or this point. To me, that is a choice now that they have made. You know what I mean? Because it's been a few years now since Daniel was convicted, and these lawsuits and everything like that. And maybe some of these women have got their finger out their backside and realised what they were doing was wrong and putting their life in danger, and yada yada. And maybe they have got themselves sorted out. Brilliant. Good on them. I wish them all the best for that. But don't continue a lie that is not true and ruin somebody's life.
Yeah.
And then these ones that have actually came forward, I mean, you know, so is this good evidence then, even if he didn't touch me?
Right.
Yeah.
That needs to be called out for what it is. She's a fucking liar. Point blank, a fucking liar who has ruined a young up and coming police officer's life because they thought it would get them fucking somewhere, get them out of the situation that they were in or whatever.
Yeah.
It's no right. And that's their choice. The ones that I blame the most in this whole situation is the fucking non-investigation, the police that were involved in it, and the fucking court system, because they all let Daniel down when they are supposed to protect. And I know we go on about protecting one of their own and everything like that, but as far as I'm aware, nobody is standing up for Daniel and saying, especially with these depositions that have came back, and they're actually sitting there saying, he never touched me. He never touched me. He never touched me. He never touched me. And yet, that man is still sitting in the fucking jail for something that he didn't do. It is wrong on all levels.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
I agree 100% with what you're saying, Alice, because absolutely at some point every single one of them know what they have done is wrong, and they all have a choice and have not taken that opportunity to admit, that they lied. And so I completely agree. In that sense, they're not victims in that sense at all. And I guess when it comes to talking about it, really always goes back to Terry Morris for me, just because I've watched all of the interviews and transcripts and whatnot that Rocky did to her, and Timothy, the Lieutenant Timothy Musney. They're horrible people, and so is Kim Davis, and they played on every weakness that all of these ladies have. And but yeah, you're right. At some point, it's like I told my youngest son and my oldest son, who are both well, my old son is in recovery. He's a recovering addict, and he's been clean for, gosh, I want to say 4 years now, which I'm thrilled about. My youngest son, who passed away last year, was also an addict. And they talk, not my oldest son so much, but my youngest would talk about the horrible upbringing that he had. He's adopted. I had adopted him, and the life that he had with his birth mother, and blah blah blah, and all those horrible things that really did happen to him. And he did start out with no chance in life, but at some point I had to tell him when he became an adult, but you still know, I raised you right from wrong. I taught you what was, and even if I didn't, you grew, you had siblings, you had other family members, you knew right from wrong, and you still made a choice to do wrong. And that's where I see these women, uh, and what they've done is, really a most heinous, act that they've done against Daniel. So no, they're not blameless in that at all.
They always say, the detectives or whoever talks about the case, Giger, they always say, the women who came forward were Terry Morris, Kayla Lyles, and Janie Liggins.
And Shardarian
Hill. But really, Morris was already out of the case. So whether Terry Morris ends up blurting out her charges against a police officer during a 911 call that her boyfriend had placed because she was destroying his car and just freaking out because she found out that he had a new girlfriend, and she was really just brokenhearted. You get a chance to hear that 911 call. It's
really sad.
It's really sad to hear, if you can try to put yourself in her situation and try to hear what she's experiencing. And you also have an opportunity to see how her brain flips, because she can flip from devastated, crying, screaming, just destroyed, to just a different person who just makes a statement like, I can't remember what she says when she flips, but just to basically answering a question in a normal way, just in the snap of a finger, to flip like that. But it's heartbreaking to listen to what's happening there. So we don't know. I mean, that could have been just in kind of excited utterance, I guess you could say, in trying to get out of trouble by blurting that out in that 911 call, because you hear when she blurts it out is when she realizes that he's calling the police on her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I picked up on, Kay, is she's wrecking his car and everything like that, shouting at him and everything, and then she hears him on the phone, and she's like, "Who you calling?" And he says, "I'm calling the cops." And then that's when she turns around and she says, "Oh, so you're going to call the bastards who raped me?" And then that's what kicked all this whole thing off, in my opinion, as well. That's what kicked this whole thing off, with them going and looking for Daniel. And that's why I say that, yes, I do believe that she was sexually assaulted by a police officer.
Yeah.
But it was the short, black man police officer that assaulted her, not the 6 foot, built like a brick shit house, half Japanese, half American police officer that assaulted her. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and just to make sure that I want to make clear, she didn't actually describe her attacker as a short black man, but she also didn't describe him as Daniel.
She did. Yeah, she said weird, inconsistent things. Like,
she really did.
I mean, she described him as someone who you would expect to be darker complected, and then she tops it off with this string of descriptions ending with Irish.
Yeah.
So that's like everything she said could have been everyone on the planet.
Everybody on the force.
So
sure.
She really didn't know.
And that's where you realize that she's just not necessarily making it up, but that she's just distraught on so many levels that she can't even form a complete description, a logical.
Which makes you think that it wouldn't have been Daniel, because to Alice's point, and I say this from just remembering the first time that I met Daniel in person. I'm 5'1". Daniel was, I mean, he is a presence that it is pretty awesome when you're stood beside professional football players and basketball players who are really tall before, but just his stature as that big of a guy towering over you. I haven't forgotten that. I really don't think I ever will forget that day that I met him. And when I think of him, I think of that presence. I immediately have a towering over. I think she would have remembered to describe someone like that if it were someone like that.
Yeah, because she doesn't describe
not an ordinary guy.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry. We're supposed to be talking about CARLA JOHNSON, and we're going down a.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about CARLA JOHNSON, but I still haven't gotten to what I think is
I know.
positive news. I don't mean that's not a dig. It's just like, it's hard to talk about. This is why why Kay and I have jello for brains right now, because with all the reading assignments that we've been asked to do, we do this. This is what we do. It's so hard to stay on on task with all
But
of this.
so just to get you back on task, what Rhonda wants to tell you about is how a few weeks ago or a week or so ago, we got the news that most likely, and now there are 9 in the civil suit.
Yes.
So,
is it 9? Oh, yeah, I've lost
well,
track.
to that point, I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah,
then
to that
yesterday
point.
changed it again. So,
Right.
yeah, if you were wanting to start there.
I do. So there's some speculation isn't the right word, but nothing is definite yet. That 2 of the accusers are considering, maybe that's a way I can say it.
No, I think it's going to happen. It's been announced. It just hasn't been formal.
There isn't an order. The order hasn't been granted. Let's just say it that way,
right,
by the judge. So in the civil suit, 2 ladies are dismissing themselves from the case, and one of them is Carla Rains, who we have not talked about yet on this show. I believe next week we will, and then the other one, drum roll please, is just a light drum roll because I got a bigger drum roll after this one. But the other one is announced at the same time is Sherry Ellis. Now, if you think back to the couple of press releases that were done, we did a press release with Tabitha Barnes, and then I think it was about 2 weeks or a month or so later, there was another press, and that was when Tabitha Barnes, we had the video saying from in her deposition 5 different times he didn't touch me. But then we did one with Sherry Ellis where she says she didn't even know who her attacker was. She's the one who described her attacker as a short black man. And I formed an opinion of who I believe that was. But anyway, we know that's not Daniel. That does not describe Daniel in any way, shape, or form. But now and then she said in her deposition, I didn't even know who it was until I saw him at the trial. She said that during her deposition. I didn't know who it was until I saw him at trial, who they were, saying had raped me. She is also dismissing herself from the civil suit. And then, so that's huge. Sherry Ellis, huge. I have my reasons, my theories of why I think she did, but we can talk about that later. But then the big drum roll on the big bass drums and every drum you can find, to me, is the biggest. We were just notified yesterday that Adara Gardner, the lady who was a minor, 17 years old at the time, and the one whose DNA was allegedly found on Daniel's pants, the only one with DNA in the entire 13 women. And she has now dismissed herself from the civil suit. I think it's fucking huge. I'm just like, it's just, I think, that's huge to me.
Well, for no other reason, that's just 3 less people that you have to do all the investigation on when you're doing paperwork, when you're trying to help with filings in the case that are coming up.
Right.
It's like, it's not like working a normal case because, we've been working it as 11 cases for this civil trial and then back to 13 again for if we have for all post-conviction stuff. So it's just a lot.
It is. Yeah. I think I said to Kay one day this week, or maybe I've said it publicly, I believe that if every one of these accusers, if there was a separate trial for every accuser, I don't think there would have been the guilties that were. I'm sure that Adara would have still gotten the guilty because that's the one that where Galen Galen Gigger lied to the jury about her DNA. Bald-faced lied about it and got away with it. and also who some at least one juror said, well, I was kind of leaning this way until we heard that DNA evidence, and then I was like, oh well, then then yeah, he must have done it. So um but if they had been tried separately, 13 different trials, which would have just been also crazy, I just don't think that he would have had the guilty verdicts that he got. I think to put all of those accusers in one trial and then to try to listen to everybody's testimony and keep, some of their trial testimonies were so twisted. Tabitha Barnes, for instance, her trial testimony was outlandish. It was ridiculous. I mean, she tested positive for PCP among other drugs while she was testifying. So so and then you know what? There's a possibility that Janie Liggins would have never gotten a guilty, possibly because there was just no evidence. There was no evidence, no DNA, no forensic evidence whatsoever to back up the claims that she made. So it's hard to think. And then there's one who's still a part of the civil suit who I kind of think will eventually drop out, or hope maybe is a better word. Kayla Lyles. um there's just
You really think that?
I that she could drop out. I think
I think she's too. I mean, she's still obviously hugely drug addicted.
yeah, watching the
I mean,
deposition.
I guess that could play a role in her dropping out eventually. But
But even Judge Heaton says, talks about her, at the very least, not saying, her claim is obviously to him anyway, not what she claims or when or how she claims. So maybe she's not lying, but there's just so yeah. So my point is that I think that there's a possibility that more will drop out. And I would like to see Kayla Lyles for sure. I'd love to see. Maybe that's what it is. It's more hoping than thinking. And like Cherie saying here on the thing, Kim Davis says, well, when you got 13, when you got one, things don't always get done. But when you've got 13, so if we keep losing these, now that was all about trial, of course, in the investigation. But as women keep dropping from, the trial, the civil suit trial isn't supposed to begin until sometime in October, if I'm not, or at least at this point anyway. So there's still lots of time for more of these people, um, who I believe blatantly lied, and it was obvious, especially the not guilties. And Kayla Lyles was a not, he got not guilty on her charges. So anyway, so those are my big newses, that I just couldn't hardly, I've like not been able to sleep because I've been so excited about sharing that information. So any questions or comments or anything in the chat, or anything that anything else that we want to address before we start talking in depth about Carla Johnson? No? Okay. So Carla Johnson also has a rather weak case, in my opinion. But I believe that I believe he got a guilty verdict on her charges. So what I did was I've recorded part of the podcast that Brian Bates did, because honestly, you guys, it's the best information there is for any of the accusers that he's covered so far. I mean, he was an investigator on Daniel's defense team, and he's got the knowledge, and he's got the facts and the evidence. So I've kind of taken some of his podcast, and that's what you're going to kind of listen to. I just dressed it up with some pictures and different things like that. But I think it's about 15 minutes long or so. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll get that started right now. If you would.
In defense, of Daniel Holtzclaw, and in this episode I will be discussing the CARLA Johnson allegations. As I mention in every episode, this podcast follows the timeline of the investigation into former Oklahoma City police officer Daniel Holtzclaw. With that in mind, we are at a point where the investigation is 2 months in, and it's really ramping up, and criminal charges, well, they're imminent. Because of that, we start to have some overlap in important events that occur on the same day or around the same time, and I have to discuss those events separately to get too confusing. In episode 11 through 13, I discussed the Tabitha Barnes allegations that were made when investigators interviewed her on August 14th and August 17th. So to keep with the investigative timeline, we need to back up again to August 14th of 2014. On this date, Oklahoma City sex crimes detective Kim Davis and fellow detective Valerie Homan set out to locate and interview 51-year-old Northeast Oklahoma City resident CARLA Johnson. According to their own official police report, which I have published on this episode's homepage at holtzclawtrial.com, Johnson's name got on the detective's radar the same way most all of the accusers were identified. Quote, Lieutenant Musney gave me a list of several females that he wanted contacted because they could possibly be victims of Officer Holtzclaw. When he gave me this list, we had still not found a match to the unidentified female DNA found on Officer Holtzclaw's pants. CARLA Johnson was on the list. On 8/14/2014, Detective Homan and I went to the last listed address in Varuna for CARLA. She answered the door. I told CARLA I received a tip that she may have been sexually assaulted by an Oklahoma City police officer. CARLA shook her head and said, Yes, ma'am, that did happen. We asked if we could come in and talk to her, and she let us in. End quote. There's a couple of things that I think I really need to point out here before we get into Johnson's allegations. For one, and once again, detectives are not responding to a complaint by Johnson. Instead, detectives are actively seeking out victims. And they only know to seek her out because their boss, Lieutenant Timothy Musney, compiled a, quote, list of likely victims, though I personally believe it's a list of most likely accusers. Regardless, this list is limited to black females with a history of prostitution and or drugs that Officer Daniel Holtzclaw had contacted while on patrol. And as I will get to when I cover the jury trial, detectives nor the prosecution could produce this list for the defense and even denied its very existence. Also, CARLA Johnson remembered Detective Davis's introductory quote a bit differently at trial, where she said, quote, She told me that they had been informed that I had been sexually assaulted by one of their police officers, end quote. Secondly, even though Detective Davis pulled Johnson's address and took Detective Homan with her to drive to Johnson's residence for the express purpose of interviewing her, Detective Davis, for whatever reason, intentionally did not record the resulting interview, even though, up to this point in the investigation, they have recorded accusers Morris, Ellis, Mathis, and Barnes. In some instances, they've recorded interviews with those people on multiple occasions. And additionally, in some of those instances, the interviews were even video recorded. Detective Davis was asked at trial how it is that she neglected to record her interview with Johnson. Her reply? That even though she took another detective with her, she didn't even bother to take a recorder because she didn't think Johnson would answer the door and that they would just leave a business card behind. Seriously, folks, this is how a seasoned Oklahoma City police detective answered under oath at criminal trial as to how she conducts a very serious investigation into one of their own officers. Also, as I've pointed out in other interviews, and as will be evident in future interviews, Both detectives Kim Davis and Rocky Gregory have a questionable habit of describing their interviewee's demeanor in a way that does not match the resulting audio and/or video. With that in mind, I'm suspect that Johnson replied in the manner in which Detective Davis portrays her in her report. Regardless, the detectives first get Johnson's background information. She's an unemployed black female and has lived at her current address in the 1800 block of Northeast 25th Street for the past 3 years. She's lived there with her platonic roommate, a Mr. Victor Wilson. Johnson self-reported that she has no victim or mental health history, is not on any medications, but does have a history of multiple arrests, prison time, and admits to smoking crack cocaine. Johnson said she recalled being stopped by the officer who sexually assaulted her twice. Though she doesn't recall the officer's name, I'm going to refer to that officer as Daniel Holtzclaw going forward in this episode, because she does ultimately identify Holtzclaw in court as her attacker. Johnson said the first encounter was about 4.5 months ago. That would have been the March 25th stop that I briefly mentioned in episode 13. The same date that Holtzclaw also stopped Accuser Florine Mathis and allegedly sexually assaulted Accuser Barnes at around 10 p.m. with her sex offender boyfriend and her children just inside her home. Johnson recalled her stop happened around 12:30 a.m., though we know it actually occurred around 9 o'clock p.m. Johnson did accurately remember the location, near Northeast 14th and Kellam. You'll recall, that's just the block from the crack house Officer Holtzclaw thought Tabitha Barnes was operating at 15th and Jordan. Johnson testified at trial that she had just left the home of a 90-year-old man that, though he's not a relative and she never identified him by name, she allegedly has been taking care of him for 4 or 5 years and simply refers to him as Papa. Johnson stated she was walking from his house at Northeast 14th and Kellam and headed to another friend's house at Northeast 15th and Kellam. Johnson told Detective Davis and later testified that Holtzclaw first drove up from behind, passed her, then made a U-turn and came back and then stopped her. She describes most of the encounter as pretty typical for that area. Officer Holtzclaw asked if she had any contraband on her. In response, she took off her jacket and emptied her pockets, which contained some cash, a lighter, and a cell phone. Johnson was also asked if she had any drugs on her, what she's been arrested for in the past, when was the last time she was arrested, and has she ever been arrested for prostitution. She says the officer even asked if she had just bought crack from the drug house on Northeast 15th. That's possibly a reference to Accuser Tabitha Barnes' home. Johnson stated that Holtzclaw next asked if she was wearing a bra. She replied, no, and quote, shook her shirt. She also claims that Holtzclaw had her remove her shoes and socks, a claim you won't hear from any other accuser. She was then instructed to take a seat in the rear driver's side of his patrol car while he searched her purse, which was sitting on the trunk of his car. Afterwards, Holtzclaw got in the driver's seat and asked where she was coming from and where she was going to. Johnson replied that she was on her way to a friend's house and that she had also been, quote, taking care of her pawpaw. According to Detective Davis's report, Holtzclaw asked Johnson 7 or 8 times if she was sure she didn't have anything down her pants. Johnson said no, and even reportedly told Holtzclaw he could call for a female officer to come and check her. Holtzclaw then ran a check on her for warrants. When she came back clear, he let her out of the patrol car. As she was getting out, Johnson said she saw a $20 bill and claimed she thought it fell out of her back pocket, so she took it. Holtzclaw then told her he wanted to check his back seat to make sure she hadn't discarded any drugs there. After a moment, he exclaimed that she needed to give him back the $20 bill. Johnson said after she made sure it wasn't hers, she returned it. She recalled Holtzclaw commenting that he had the money back there for a reason, but didn't give any more details. Johnson then walked away, allegedly to a friend's house. While Johnson doesn't claim anything inappropriate happened on this first stop, she does on the second stop, which she said was about a month and a half later, around 2 in the morning. Records would later confirm that Holtzclaw did indeed stop Johnson on May 26, 2014, but it was around 12 a.m. Johnson said she was once again walking, this time from a cousin's duplex near Northeast 16th Terrace and Jordan Avenue, when Holtzclaw rounded the corner around Northeast 16th and Jordan Avenue and, according to Johnson, almost hit her. He stopped, and he began as he did before, by asking what she was up to and where she was coming from and where she was headed to. Johnson said she told Officer Holtzclaw that she was on her way home from her cousin's house. Holtzclaw then turned his attention to whether or not she had drugs or a weapon on her. Johnson said she replied, no, and emptied her pockets. When she pulled out condoms, Holtzclaw asked if she was out prostituting. She again replied, no. He next had Johnson get in the back of his patrol car while he sat up front and ran her for warrants. Johnson said he made mention of recalling stopping her several weeks ago, but that he thought he had taken her to jail. When she came back clear for warrants, Holtzclaw, once again, let her out of his patrol car and asked her if she had any drugs, specifically if she had drugs hidden in her pants. Again, she claimed she was adamant she did not. Johnson claims that Holtzclaw then told her, quote, let me check, to which she turned around, thinking he was just going to pat search her. But that's not what she claims happened. When Johnson first spoke to Detective Davis, she was clear. Officer Holtzclaw reached around and grabbed both of her breasts and fondled them, on top of her shirt. Johnson stated she was not wearing a bra. However, at preliminary hearing, she updated her version so that it was much more favorable to the prosecution, and now she is wearing a bra, and Officer Holtzclaw touched her under her shirt and under her bra, skin to skin. After the discrepancy was pointed out by defense attorney Scott Adams, Johnson changed it back to on top of her shirt while wearing a bra. At jury trial, while no longer skin to skin, she's now allegedly not wearing a bra. Johnson said that Holtzclaw next put his hands down the front of her pants, under her underwear, and touched her vagina, and, specifically, her clitoris. According to Detective Davis's report, Johnson replied, quote, sir, please, you are not supposed to do that, end quote. To which Officer Holtzclaw's only alleged reply was, quote, okay, you can go. Johnson claims that as she walked away, she used her cell phone to call her roommate, Victor Wilson. Johnson stated her cell phone is broken and that while whomever she calls can hear her, she cannot hear them. Johnson said she didn't know if Victor answered his phone and that she kept saying, quote, I'm walking, I'm scared, this officer is really strange, he put his hands down my pants, end quote. Johnson said as she was walking home, she rounded the corner onto Kellum, and Officer Holtzclaw was coming up behind her again. She said he pulled up beside her and exclaimed, quote, as a matter of fact, you have a warrant, you need to take care of that, end quote. At trial, the prosecution forwarded the theory that Officer Holtzclaw made the existence of a warrant statement to scare Johnson and to use it over her in future sexual assaults. At preliminary hearing, Johnson testified that Officer Holtzclaw's comments didn't concern her or make her nervous because she knew she didn't have a warrant. When Johnson got home, she learned that her roommate had indeed never answered the phone when she called. So she explained what had just happened. At preliminary hearing, Johnson testified that she not only discussed what happened, but that she and Mr. Wilson actually listened to the voicemail she had left. She testified that you could only hear bits and pieces of it, and that after they listened to it, Wilson deleted it. However, at trial, Johnson testified under oath that she didn't really talk to Wilson about the event, and didn't even know if she had indeed left a voicemail, and certainly didn't listen to it, and certainly knows nothing about deleting the voicemail that very night. She told Detective Davis she didn't report the incident, because she didn't think anyone would believe her. However, she did offer to take a polygraph and stated she could pick the officer out of a photo lineup. Detective Davis indicates in her report that she returned the next day and obtained 4 buccal swabs or DNA samples from Johnson at her home. What she doesn't indicate in her official investigative report is that she had another detailed, unrecorded discussion with Ms. Johnson. And we have reason to believe that they had this undocumented discussion because Johnson herself testified to it at the preliminary hearing. For some unknown reason, Detective Davis waits over a month, and only after Officer Holtzclaw has been arrested to contact CARLA Johnson's roommate, Victor Wilson, to see if he can even corroborate any of Johnson's allegations. According to Detective Davis's official report, she made contact with Mr. Wilson on the phone on September 18th of 2014. Wilson is a 58-year-old black male and admits that he and Johnson once were in a dating relationship, but over time they ended the relationship but continued to live with each other as roommates. Wilson recalled the May 26th early morning call from Johnson. He told Detective Davis that because of the late hour, he did not answer the phone. However, he stated that the next day he noticed he had a voicemail and it was from Johnson. Wilson said when he listened to the voicemail, he heard Johnson state, quote, "She was pulled over by a police officer while she was walking, and he felt all over her," end quote. Detective Davis noted that Wilson claims he didn't talk to Johnson much about it, but that she just mentioned that an officer stopped her and ran his hand down her pants. Detective Davis noted that Wilson had, quote, "since deleted the voicemail." There's not a lot to this case, and by that I mean, it's a pretty straightforward he said, she said, without much direct evidence on either side, except for the testimony of the accuser, and I think this is key. Whenever you have a he said, she said, credibility and consistency are virtually all you have to go on. I'd simply argue this accuser has neither of those on her side. Detective Davis is either completely inept or she intentionally was giving Johnson and Wilson time to get their stories straight. Why else would you not interview the roommate of an accuser who claims that roommate possesses key evidence? And with that, I go back to the foundation of all criminal proceedings like this. In the absence of direct forensic evidence and the absence of independent eyewitnesses, you must rely on the credibility of those making the allegations and those being accused. Lying on the stand, or at least one's inability to be consistent with critical facts, should cause you to lose your credibility. Unfortunately, we're dealing with an investigation spearheaded by a detective that believes her accusers are credible, despite all factual information to the contrary.
We'll take our time and we'll verify everything the girls say, or we'll verify everything he said. And that's the way the chips are going to fall. And everything the girls said verified and nothing he said did.
Okay, so that actual episode of the podcast, it's episode 14, and it actually is about almost 40 minutes long. And so I did cut off quite a bit at the end, but I wanted to make sure. So, also, to encourage you to, whatever your favorite app is for listening to podcasts, go check out. You can get 25, the first 25, I think, that he has done, Brian Bates. He's not finished. He still has several accusers to go through. And then, of course, he's going to go through, I would imagine, maybe season 2 would be covering the trial itself. But at any rate, just
he
go
said
find.
that he has them all recorded, but he's not going to release them until the civil case is over because he was getting subpoenaed for documents, and it was time consuming and annoying.
Right.
Feeling like he was doing the investigation for the plaintiff's attorneys. So he said somewhere, I can't remember, I think in that CrimeCon thing that Jenny and Erica did with him, with Nikki Jackson from Purdue University, that he had them all recorded and ready to download, and he was going to release them all at once when everything is done. So that'll be like Christmas.
Yeah, it will. That'll be really cool. Like, oh yeah. So yeah, but you can listen to it, and Kay just pointed it out to me yesterday. The podcasts themselves are not on the HoltzclawTrial.com website. But each episode has a homepage where you can read the transcript of the podcast, and there's pictures and all kinds of good stuff in the homepages. So definitely check that out. But you can go to and Alice just posted in the chat on Podbean. You can listen to the actual podcast. So you can listen to it on your favorite podcast app, and then you can also read the transcript and see other little bonus things that he's added on the homepage at HoltzclawTrial.com. So go and listen to the rest of this one. It's probably about another 15 minutes or so of it. But I just wanted to play the gist of the story of the accusation by CARLA Johnson. So you can have an idea that basically what her story is and how it just doesn't add up. And
isn't her story bizarre?
It's so bizarre.
I mean, can you imagine this one? I mean, he didn't assault her allegedly on this time, but okay, shake your shirt out. Okay, now I want you to take off your socks and shoes.
Yeah, which was weird.
Yeah, okay. Now give me back that $20 bill you stole out of the back seat. You'd think people could figure out what the $20 bill test is.
Right.
It's like just
well, I mean, the thing with the shoes, the thing with the socks and shoes, I mean, that could have been looking for paraphernalia, drugs, something like that. That I can understand because it actually happened to myself. I used to go clubbing a lot. And the security, they search you before you go in to make sure you've got no weapons or drugs or anything like that. And I'd been gone for years and years and years. And I went to this certain club in Glasgow, and I got the pat down as normal. But don't get me wrong, it was a female security guard that done it. But she patted me down, she checked me, and she done the rim, the bra, round the rim of the bra just to make sure. And then she asked me to stand on my tiptoes. And I looked at her as if she was daft. I was like, I've went to many clubs and I've been searched plenty times. I says, but not once have I ever been asked to stand on my tiptoes. I was like, stand on my tiptoes? So I stood on my tiptoes and I did what she said. And I went to the side and I went, excuse me. I went, can I ask you? I says, I've been to many clubs. I says, and I've been searched and tapped down many times. I says, but this is the first I've been asked to stand on my tiptoes. I was like, can you explain that to me, please? And she went, you'll be amazed at how people try and sneak things in to clubs, especially weapons. She says, and it's to make sure that you've not got a blade or anything like that in your shoes. And I was like, oh my God, well, that's a first.
Wow.
That's funny. Well, yeah, it's just, it's, so yeah, well, the thing of it is with CARLA Johnson is she says that he told her to take her socks and shoes off, but none of the other 13 or 12 accusers ever said anything like that. In fact, none of them actually had to actually get naked, completely disrobe or whatever. So, they claim that he made them pull their pants down or lift their shirts up or whatever, but nobody ever had to get completely naked. So
Well, so maybe to Alice's point, the take your shoes and socks off thing was part of him just searching her for drugs.
yeah,
And,
it could have been.
you know, it was obviously that's what he was doing, was stops like that. So she just didn't insert a lie into that true sequence of events. Because
Right.
that's just so maddening that those are the hardest things to prove when the women just, when they remember the stop
Yeah.
and they insert the lie into the real facts.
Yeah, like taking her pants down. I mean, telling her to take her pants down
Mm.
and then just leaving it. It's like, what? Why would he need to tell you to take your pants down to search you?
Yeah.
It just does not make sense, women. You know what I mean? You can search somebody without having to put your knickers around your ankles. You know what I mean?
Right.
So even that doesn't make sense. Him asking to pull her knickers down, it just does not work in my opinion. You know what I mean? It really doesn't, and that's a made up part in my mind that she's made up to try and make it seem worse than what it actually was. Oh, he made me pull my pants down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Knickers.
Did she say that he had her sit up front while he called her in? Did you guys catch that?
I did not hear that.
I thought I heard that. And if that's the case, are you serious? Obviously, Daniel uses his front passenger floorboard as a trash can.
Right.
I mean, he does. I do. I used to do that in my Maxima all the time. I think it drove my husband nuts. But I always did that. And I mean, I understand that. But he wouldn't put someone in the front seat because that's his trash can.
I didn't hear that, but I'll have to go back and listen to it, I think, because I don't remember
sure
hearing
that's
that.
what it said.
I'll
correct me if I'm wrong.
I sure will. You know me. I'm all about calling somebody out when they say something. I'm just kidding. But I will have to go back and listen to it. I don't remember hearing that, but that would be interesting. Because Daniel, well, no police officers that I've ever even seen on TV crap or real true crime stuff never put a suspect in their front seat. It's always the back seat. They can't get out of the back seat. They can't open the door from the inside of the back seat. And if they put them in the front seat, they could open the door and, bail if that was their intention. So yeah, that would be really weird. I'll have to check it out though. But yeah, go listen to the rest of it. I honestly can't remember everything else that he does go into with it. But I really thought it was interesting what Kim Davis says at the end, where I chose to cut it off, about, that they're going to check out everything that these girls say, and everything that they're saying checks out, and nothing that he says did. Well, two things are wrong with that. Number one, she says everything the girls say or the women say checks out. That is not true. The only thing that nothing checks out. The only thing that checks out is that they were able to prove that Daniel had contact with these ladies at some point on some dates. And there is how the accusation was formed. Okay, well, we can show that he stopped you on this date at this area, and that he was stopped with you for X amount of minutes, and so we're going to build your story around that.
They could build a case against any officer
that way, any officer.
And I'd like to build a case against someone doing that.
Yeah,
I can think of a few people.
And other than the lie that was told here by our esteemed lying fucking assistant district attorney in Oklahoma, Oklahoma County, Oklahoma City. There is nothing except AVL or the vehicle's GPS and a story built around that. The only other thing is the lie that Giger and Elaine Taylor told at trial. And during the trial, this little flyer that I've made, Holtzclaw trial prosecutor Galen Giger misled the jury and an accuser about the DNA evidence. So over on the left side, Holtzclaw trial question asked by prosecutor Galen Giger, answered by the state's DNA expert witness, OCPD lab analyst Elaine Taylor. Okay, Miss Taylor, you can't say how that DNA got there, can you, from a scientific standpoint? Answer, the only thing I can tell you is it is a biological material that originated from Miss Gardner. Fact, no vaginal fluid was observed or detected on the fly of Daniel Holtzclaw's uniform pants. And then Miss Gardner, during her deposition, that was taken on May 22nd of 2019. And by the way, this is the same Dara Gardner who just dismissed herself from this federal civil lawsuit. She's asked a question, and she, in the deposition, and her answer is, well, I was in the witness room, or whatever that room is called, where they have the witnesses waiting to go testify. I was there, and this is very important. Galen Giger came to me and he told me, I believe you. Out of all the other women, I believe you. And I said, why? And he said, because we were looking for a match of DNA that we found inside his police pants, and it was you. We found your vaginal fluid on the inside and outside of his police pants. And then she says, he encouraged me to testify because it would help the other women if I testified, because I was the only one with physical evidence. And I'm pretty sure she didn't mean to, but she definitely outed Galen Giger for encouraging.
See, that's the exact same shit I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Look what he said to her.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is,
What,
I don't know if coercive is the right thing, but that's coercive. That's 100% coercive, if that's the right word. Suggestive, maybe suggestive is a better word. What were you going to say, Kay?
Well, I don't know. I just feel like telling him his story. He told her that.
Yeah.
Which is real telling, because that is what he ended up saying at trial. So it's almost like he was selling his thing that he was going to say to her.
Yeah. Yep.
So she could match it.
So she could match it up, yeah.
And making her feel like, even if she, and I know she knows that she wasn't raped by Daniel Holtzclaw. I believe that she knows that. Right. No matter what level of mental illness or what state of intoxication, I believe that on that day, because she was pretty straight when Daniel was with her. So I believe she knows. She could also feel like he did do that to a lot of the other women, and having the prosecutor basically embolden her to be the savior for those other women by her testimony.
Right.
To put that officer in his place. We have to remember he's talking to a 17-year-old girl.
Right.
Crazy. Yeah, back then, Kay, she was a 17-year-old girl, and she could be easily manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
But now she will be in her, what, early 20s, mid-20s?
Yeah.
You know? So she knows right from wrong.
She
knows accusing somebody of something that they've not done is wrong. So is this maybe why she's pulled herself out?
I don't
of
know. I mean, she's a really smart girl. When you listen to her deposition, she is smart. She's quick,
Very, yeah.
very quick. Nothing gets by her. I mean, and she expresses herself well. She's bright. It's a
She
waste.
is.
It is a waste.
It is a waste. It's very sad. What a waste it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I mean, drugs and that are bad on anybody, you know, but for her still to be saying that this is true, I mean, at 17, you can easily be manipulated by the police, by the DA, the ADA, whoever. But now she's at the age where she knows that it's wrong, you know, and it annoys me that women like that think it's okay to keep quiet about that kind of thing when she knows fine well in her own mind and her own body that Daniel never touched her at all, apart from stopping her to search her purse and everything like that. Period. You know, the excuse can't be used. Oh, but she was only a wee lassie. She was yeah, that was back then. Now she's a fully grown woman and she knows right from wrong, and she knows, or she should know, what's happening to Daniel, that it's wrong. And if they are getting her to lie about what Daniel done to her, then surely she should be thinking, well, if they're getting me to lie, how many other women? I mean, maybe that's just hopeful thinking on my part, that you would think she would be like, well, if they did that to me back then and tried to get me to lie and everything like that about what happened, how many more of these other women could be lying, you know? And it could only take maybe one of these women or two of these women to actually come forward and say, look, they screwed up, Daniel done nothing, and hopefully it will help his case. But I can't see it happening, and it annoys me and it angers me that these women think it's all right to still keep quiet about this all these years later.
Yeah, maybe as time goes on, they will begin to see that. I mean, they sued the wrong people, and that they sued for the wrong reasons. I think they could have won a case against Oklahoma City Police Department, the two detectives. I mean, Galen Gigger has so much prosecutorial immunity, he knows that he can't be touched. But, to sue them for using them as pawns in their dirty little scheme.
Yeah.
For putting words in their head.
That's their only possibility of getting any money is being able to prove that. Admitting, yep, I did lie and I said horrible things about an innocent man, and I did that because, and I'm not saying that it's a right defense, but that's the way they're going to get money, not by trying to sue Daniel. That's ridiculous.
Well, no recordings exist apparently to disprove any speculation of what kind of conversations took place. So
yeah,
the whole no recordings thing would completely backfire on them if they were sued in that way.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I hope.
Yeah, so hopefully with these, with Adara dismissing herself from the case, and then the likelihood of Sherry Ellis and Carla Raines. Just so you guys, if you don't, those who are still with us and watching, if you're not familiar, Carla Raines is a woman who started out very favorably for Daniel, and her interview was recorded. Rocky Gregory was the one who approached her, and she said 7 times initially during this initial interview with Rocky Gregory that she had never been assaulted by a police officer, and particularly by Daniel Holtzclaw, by Officer Holtzclaw. She said it 7 times. And then eventually, and I think if people really break down her interview, you can hear her say, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about cops on patrol exposing themselves to women, and asking for favors." And then Rocky manages to twist that to make that sound like Carla Raines said, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, Officer Holtzclaw stopped me and exposed himself to me, and then made me expose myself to him." And that is not at all really, if you pay attention to that interview, what she's saying. But she managed to probably, they probably told her, "Look, you can get into a civil suit and sue for damages and sue for money, if you say these things and admit to these things or agree to these things."
They
And
don't even have to say that. They can say things like, "Well, victims like you are entitled to whatever amount of money in civil claims. It's horrible that something like this, if something like this happened to you and you're just not wanting to tell me about it."
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
There's the money.
Yeah.
Somewhere the story changes.
Yep. And her story changes, and now all of a sudden was assaulted by Officer Daniel Holtzclaw. So that's Carla Raines' case. Now she is likely also dropping from the civil suit, and we will discuss her case more. We'll discuss her case next week, and give you more details about her case that probably just, not that any of the others haven't already, but probably just going to really piss you off when you hear the interview with Rocky Gregory. At least I know it does me. So anyway, that's kind of what we have for tonight. A pretty good beginning to the accusations from Carla Johnson. Not fabulous news for disgraced former Judge Timothy Henderson, but it's not over yet. We're waiting for OSBI. And then, of course, the bigger news, and for me, these 3 that, particularly Adara Gardner. And I like to think too that, Sherry Ellis has seen the video. I can't imagine she hasn't seen the video that we did for the press release, where she obviously not only, so something else in her deposition that isn't, hasn't been talked about is she claims that, that this officer, you see her in the interview with Kim Davis, in the first interview in the office, where she's telling Kim Davis, "Yeah, I'm this tall," and we talked a little bit about this last week. "I'm this tall, and he's not as tall as me." Well, in her deposition, she explains that by saying that, "Oh, now I know why I said that now, that he was shorter than me, because I was standing on the curb or on the sidewalk, and he was standing on the street, and it was about a 6 or 8 inch curb that made me taller than what he is," which is just outrageous.
That's a lie. Exactly, Rhonda. That's a lot of bullshit. Even if Daniel was standing on the fucking road or the pavement, he would still tower over the top here.
Yeah.
Now, I've not met Daniel, but my lad's dad was 6'1". And I swear to God, when we were going out, it was like little and large walking down the street.
Yeah.
you know, because I'm just under 5'2", so I was tiny compared to him, you know, and it didn't matter whether he was on the pavement or not. I still had to tiptoe to give him a bloody kiss.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have mattered whether Daniel was on the pavement or on the road. He still would have been taller than her. You know what I mean? So that excuse is just pathetic, in my opinion.
Not to mention that the curb really is only 3 inches high.
Yes.
How does she explain when she has to step off of the curb onto the street to go get in his car?
Right. Yep.
I mean, then she's not on a 6 to 8 inch curb anymore.
Right. Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, I like to think that she's seen that video, you know, that's public of her deposition, and think that she's just like, oh hell no, I can't face this. I can't do this. I don't know. I have no idea why any of them are, you know, are dropping or considering leaving, but doesn't matter.
I wouldn't want to be on the newscast for a day and a half, you know, having basically saying, "Oh, well, that wasn't him."
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, you know, you know, but I just hope that in the coming weeks and months we see more of them drop out, and you know, I feel certain that Janie Liggins is one who will not leave. She is definitely, even if she's the only one left, I can't even imagine her. It all started with her.
She'll be standing side by side with Benjamin Crump, and they'll be raising their hands together no matter what.
Yep. And justice was not served in this civil case, but
we will.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh my God.
So disgusting.
Yeah, no love lost there for Janie Liggins, Kayla Lyles, or Shardarion Hill. Those 3, just no love lost for those 3.
Yeah, same.
Man.
Yes, it was also played.
Yeah.
Cherie, yes, it was played on.
It was played on, I think, four channels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and let's see here. Dark Side, thank you so much. You're welcome, and thank you for coming and sticking it out. I know it's late for you, so thank you so much for being here with us. And yes, that was played. And then Rob said, a wise man once said, quote, the truth will out, end quote. Yeah, truth wins, right? Truth wins. Sometimes it wins at a very, very slow pace. Sometimes it wins rapidly and in small chunks, but truth wins. So
better to keep saying that, because sometimes it feels easy to feel like, ugh.
Yeah, I know.
All so corrupt.
It's like the only thing that I can tell myself to remain positive at times.
I wish the truth would win
more. Yeah. That I do too. I hope it does.
All right. Good show.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you guys for being here with me. Kay, for filling in all my gaps and fixing my mistakes, and I appreciate that. And Cherie, Alice, thank you guys so much for being here and dropping links and answering questions in the chat as well, and for all of your comments and opinions. And if there's nobody else has anything to say, well, I should let Kay and Cherie and Alice say goodbye, and before I just jump out.
Thank you for having me on again, Rhonda. It's always lovely to be with you, ladies. And thanks to everyone in panel and chat who stuck with us tonight. And go and check out the podcast and the websites and stuff.
Thanks, Alice.
Hey, yeah. Good night, guys. It was fun chatting this case over again. Check out Bates' podcast, Bates Investigates. And,
yep.
catch up.
All right. Cherie, you got anything?
She might.
There she is. Cherie,
Good night, and thanks for coming, everyone.
got anything? All right. All right, everybody in chat.
I just thanks for coming, everyone.
She has her YouTube on.
Oh, sure, YouTube. All right. Well, that's gonna end us for tonight. Come back next week, and like I said, we're gonna talk about Carla Raines. Hopefully, we'll have more news from the federal lawsuit. And until then, peace out.